here are 9 of the best ETFs that make you rich faster than investing in only the S&P 500 or Vanguard's VOO. And these ETFs are called growth ETFs, and this type of ETF focuses on investing in fast expanding and often more volatile companies in hopes of beating the overall stock market over a long enough period of time. And why growth ETFs are amazing is because if the S&P 500 achieves on average 10% annual returns with an investment of just $600 per month for the next 30 years, we would have over $1 million. But if we complement a diversified portfolio with a growth ETF, which is what I do because I hold the majority of my money in the S&P 500 VOO, but I also have a growth ETF in my portfolio for more exposure to technology stocks at something like a 13% annual return, then our original investment will double to over $2 million. Which is why growth ETFs are such a powerful tool to add to your ETF arsenal to get you rich way faster. So in this video, I'm going to provide a complete breakdown of 9 of the best growth ETFs that have historically outperformed the S&P 500 and hopefully will outperform the S&P 500 well into the future. So without further ado, let's get started. The first 2 ETFs are information technology ETFs, that being Vanguard's VGT and Fidelity's FTech. I feel like I've talked about VGT a lot on my channel, so in this video I'm going to touch on Fidelity's FTech and give them the limelight because they are very similar ETFs both in characteristics as well as performance. FTech is Fidelity's MSCI Information Technology Index ETF, and it tracks the MSCI USA IMI Information Technology Index that captures all 3 of large cap, mid cap, and small cap segments of the USA market. Even though FTech's objective is to hold mainly information technology stocks, it holds subsectors of this market like semiconductors, system software, technology hardware, electronics, and many more. Some of FTech's top holdings are Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Broadcom, Salesforce, and Adobe. It has a very low expense ratio of 0.08%, awarding it an A+ rating by Seeking Alpha, where VGT has an expense ratio of 0.1% and an A rating. The dividend yield of FTech is around 0.7%, which isn't too bad because it actually has been able to grow its dividend over the past 10 years. The returns are also absolutely insane, of over 20% annually over the past 5 and 10 years, and compared to the S&P 500 ETF VOO, FTech has massively outperformed the S&P 500 and slightly edges out VGT over the past 5 years, but over the past 10 years, the scripts flip as VGT takes the throne over FTech for that highest outperformance. The third and fourth ETFs are both semiconductor ETFs, one being SMH by VanEck and the other is iShares SOXX. Since I haven't talked about any of these ETFs on my channel, if I flip a coin and heads will equal SMH and tails will equal SOXX, and when we flip the coin, the winner is SMH. SMH is VanEck's semiconductor ETF, and it tracks the MVIS US listed Semiconductor 25 Index, and its goal is to track the overall performance of companies involved in semiconductor production and equipment. But it also holds semiconductor stocks outside the USA, like in Taiwan, Netherlands, Bermuda, and in Switzerland. Some of its top holdings are Nvidia, TSM, Broadcom, Texas Instruments, AMD, and ASML. SMH has a bit of a higher expense ratio of 0.35%, awarding it a B rating by Seeking Alpha, and SOX has the exact same expense ratio metrics, but 0.35% is just fine because specific sector ETFs, as well as when you hold stocks outside of the USA, especially internationally, do tend to have higher fees. The dividend yield of SMH is around 0.4%, and I wouldn't bother looking at the dividend growth of this fund because its main goal is capital appreciation or higher returns well into the future. And the returns are out of this world of nearly 30% annually over the last 10 years and over 30% annually over the past 5 years. And compared to the S&P 500, SMH has massively outperformed this index by a very wide margin and has easily edged out stocks over the past 10 years and even over the last 5 years of performance, so SMH takes the throne over stocks for its high returns over the last decades. The fifth ETF is XLK, the Technology Select Sector SPDR Fund. XLK basically invests into the technology sector of the S&P 500, so it's 100% invested into tech stocks, making this a very hyper-aggressive and hyper-growth ETF that provides great exposure to semiconductors, IT, AI, and communication and software companies. Some of XLK's top holdings are Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple, Broadcom, Salesforce, and Adobe. XLK also has a low expense ratio of 0.09%, awarding it a solid A rating by Seeking Alpha. The current dividend yield of XLK is around 0.7%, and it actually has some solid dividend growth over the past decade, which is pretty cool to see in my opinion. And the returns of XLK are just as crazy as the ones on our list, of over 20% returns annually over the past 5 years and as well as the last 10 years, and compared to VOO, XLK has of course crushed it over the last 5 and 10 years with its high outperformance. The sixth ETF is a sleeper, and that's MGK, Vanguard's Mega Cap Growth ETF. MGK seeks to track the performance of the CRSP US Mega Cap Growth Index, and this provides a great and convenient way to have exposure to the largest growth stocks in the US market. Looking at MGK's sector holdings, it holds mostly tech stocks alongside communication, consumer cyclical, healthcare, financials, defensive stocks, and many more. MGK's top holdings are Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Amazon, Meta, and Google. MGK has a very low expense ratio of just 0.07%, awarding it an excellent A+ rating with a current dividend yield of around 0.4%, with a little more of stagnant growth-like dividend characteristics. And compared to VOO or the S&P 500, MGK has absolutely widened the gap in the race of outperformance and higher returns over the last 5 and 10 years. Number 7 on our list is QQQM, Invesco's Nasdaq 100 ETF. QQQM seeks to provide exposure to US large cap growth stocks from the Nasdaq 100 index, which also happen to be some of the world's most innovative companies from the technology sector, but also other sectors of the stock market like Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Meta, and Broadcom, and Amazon. QQQM has a low expense ratio of 0.15%, awarding it an A- rating by Seeking Alpha, and QQQM's current dividend yield is around 0.7%, and historically the Nasdaq 100 has grown its dividend over the course of time. Since QQQM's inception is kind of short compared to QQQ's longer time horizon of inception, I'm going to be using the original Invesco QQQ's returns for QQQM's returns as well. So the returns of the Nasdaq 100 index are over 18% annually over the past 10 years and over 20% over the last 5 years. And since the data is missing from over the past 5 and 10 years for QQQM, the original QQQs has obviously crushed the S&P 500 over the past 5 and 10 years with its massive outperformance compared to the overall market. The 8th and 9th ETFs are similar funds in that they are large cap growth ETFs, that being SEHG by Charles Schwab and VUG by Vanguard. SEHG, which makes up the largest portion of my Roth IRA. So for that in mind, I'm going to be talking about VUG because I haven't talked about it on this channel. VOO is Vanguard's growth ETF, and it seeks to track the performance of the CRSP US Large Cap Growth Index, which provides a convenient way to have exposure to the nation's largest growth stocks. VOO's top holdings are Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and Google. The expense ratio of VOO and SCHG are the lowest on our list with the same fee of 0.04%. The dividend yield of VOO currently sits at around 0.5%, and the dividend growth isn't the best for VOO, but that's totally okay because the goal of growth ETFs, like I said earlier, is for capital appreciation, and most growth stocks reinvest their net income back into their company and not into a dividend to most investors. The returns of VOO is over 15% annually over the last 10 years and over 17% over the last 5 years. And comparing it to the S&P 500, VOO has beaten the S&P 500 and crushed it over the years, but SCHG has actually beaten VOO from a return standpoint over the last 5 and 10 years of outperformance. And lastly, here's an honorable mention list of some excellent growth ETFs that couldn't make it to the list on this video, so I'm showing some love to other ETFs that are in the stock market. Now, if you guys like this video, please give it a like because this cute puppy did. And right here's a shout out to my YouTube members of my investing membership group. So I love you guys so much for that. And right here's going to be a video of some of the best ETFs that aren't VOO or SCHD that make you rich fast as well. And right here is going to be a video on how many ETFs should you actually own in your investing portfolio. Now, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day, continue to crush in the stock market, and take it easy. Peace.